the other pubs in the group, they definitely take influence from Irish pubs in terms of the look and feel. So lots of timber, lots of nooks and crannies, really low lighting. And then again, it's all about the service and hospitality.
Hey there, everybody. You're with Dani Valent, and we are Dirty Linen. We air the industries that the hospitality industry sometimes finds hard to talk about. I always love getting in a virtual room with my guests and with you as listeners. There are so many things you could be doing with your time, and I really am grateful that you're spending it with me. We will make it worth your while. If you love the show, please tell your friends. Send them a link. More audience is always good. Rate us on your app. We love that too. There's always so many things to talk about when we talk about food and hospitality and the people who make it what it is. At the moment, we are certainly hearing a lot about challenges in the economy broadly and in the hospitality industry particularly. But I'm also always struck by the optimism, the investment, the building and the growing. You could say that happens with an eye on business opportunity, but surely it's also because of an enduring belief in hospitality and gathering, the centrality of that to the human experience. And who better to talk about that with than an Irishman? Liam Ganley is owner of the Fifth Province and Freddie Wimpoles in St Kilda, and Angus and Bon in Paran, the Bay Hotel in Mornington, and recently they also snapped up the Windsor Castle and the Carlton Club in the Melbourne CBD. Liam, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thanks very much, Dani. Thank you for having me.
How do you see this balance between challenge and opportunity?
Yeah, look, it's definitely some challenges out there, and as you said, there's some opportunities as well, which generally happens when times are tough, and yeah, there's some great opportunities out there, and I guess in some ways it's a little bit easier when you're getting a little bit bigger and you've got more economies of scale, you've got some better purchasing power, you get some better deals at your big suppliers. So in many ways, it's you know, you've also created opportunities for your senior staff and that. So in some ways, I've always said I found it harder running one or two venues than running multiple venues because, you know, at the very beginning, you're doing everything yourself. You know, you don't have help. So in some ways, it's a little bit easier.
Tell me, Liam, about how you have undertaken that growth. I mean, you've bought a couple of new venues recently, but you're also expanding some of those that you have. How do you consider the opportunities before you?
I guess I'm not like I'm actively looking for opportunities. So we're not like actively looking to grow. I guess with the Windsor Castle is a good example. The Windsor Castle and then the Carlton Club, when those opportunities came across my desk, the Windsor Castle in particular was one that just I loved. I think it's a fantastic pub. I've been going there for years, and it's just been a place that's very, very close to my heart, and it ticked a lot of boxes in terms of the types of venues that I love frequenting, but also ones that I love working on. So it's a heritage facade, a heritage site, a corner block with a great beer garden, a lot of mature trees in there, beautiful feature native fig tree in the beer garden at the back. So it ticked a lot of boxes. And in Windsor, a little bit off the beaten track, which I love as well. And kind of one of those places where you can go to, you know, for a beer pre-dinner or post-dinner for a drink. And you kind of don't get those big spikes in trade that kind of, you know, on a Saturday night being on a high street where it can be a bit chaotic. So I just love it. A really, really great site. But then, of course, when the Windsor Castle came up, those were being sold as part of two businesses. It was the Windsor Castle and then the Carlton Club. And I actually initially turned down the Carlton Club just because we had a lot on. It wasn't like your really traditional type corner pub, which is kind of what we do. I guess it was operating really as a nightclub. And the city had been struggling, you know, post-COVID. And it's a huge site, really, really big site. So it's one of the biggest venues in the city in terms of patron numbers. But I think they had a deal done with someone else. It fell through, and it was opportunity then was put in front of me again. And I'd been there over the years. A phenomenal building, one of the original sort of rooftop beer gardens in the city. I think when I came to Melbourne in 2011, there was really only Cookie and Carlton. And incredible. Like it was, and Tracy had done an unbelievable job there, Tracy Lester. Just a great vibe, very quirky, very unique, a little bit like the Windsor Castle. So kind of reluctantly, I was like, oh, should I take this on? Have we taken on a little bit too much? But thankfully, we had the team in place at the time. We had some really good staff at head office. And it was kind of like, I saw it as an opportunity to keep a pipeline of work and venues ahead for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's kind of a big part of wanting to grow as well. It's not just growing for the sake of growth. It's also keeping senior staff and engaged and keeping like paths available for them to progress in their careers and being able to get really talented young managers and chefs and bartenders to give them a path to climb the ladder. And I find that when you've got 1 or 2 venues, or maybe only a single venue, you can only hold these staff for so long before, they move on to bigger and better things. And you want to encourage them to do that as well. And you don't want to be sort of hampering their growth. So growing gives you the ability to do that and nurture these staff and train them and provide a path for them to progress.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, I'd love you to take us back to your arrival in Australia or before that as well. What place has hospitality had for you in your life?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the west of Ireland. I left, I worked in construction. So I studied construction management in college, and I went on to work with one of the largest building companies in Ireland, in Dublin. So I grew up in Galway, small city, beautiful pubs, amazing seafood, great hospitality, some of the best in the world, and live music. And, the pubs in Galway and in rural Galway, where I'm from a little village just south of the city, about 20 minutes. And, there in that little village of a couple of thousand people, there's 4 little pubs. One of them is a thatched pub, a couple of 100 years old. We've got another beautiful, famous seafood restaurant just down the road from my house, a little thatched cottage. It's on a beautiful little inlet of the bay, and I think it's in its 7th generation now, running that place, and it's famous oysters. So they're native Clanbridge oysters, and you'd see people in there, and it's just Guinness and oysters. The ladies might have a glass of champagne and oysters, but really, really simple food, beautiful setting, really cozy, really pared back, really minimal. Where it's all about the atmosphere and the simplicity of the produce, and really the warm welcome that you get when you go in there. It's just, you could sit in there for hours. And tourists mainly from America, from North America, there's not a day you'd go there where you wouldn't see a famous actor or a politician or coming in and out of there to experience it. And I guess we took it for granted growing up. My dad used to go to the pub on a Saturday. Ritual was, growing up, that everyone met in the pub. The pub was the heart of the community. It was the heart of these villages. That's where there was no phones. We had a landline in your house, and you had a landline in the pub. If you wanted to get your parents on a Saturday night, you rang the pub and you asked for them, and that's where they'd be. And it was interesting, like when you'd go down to the pub, and even it's weird because oysters are really seen like as this delicacy now, and they're expensive. But like growing up, like we'd be sitting at the bar in our local pub in Clanbridge, and like the adults or the men would come in, and it's like a bar snack. So they'd order like half a dozen oysters or a dozen oysters, and they'd be sipping on a Guinness while they're chatting. And that's just what they did. And I guess we took it for granted because those native Clanbridge oysters, they're actually sold now and exported to all the Michelin star restaurants in Spain and France and Italy. I came across them in Dubai recently. And these are what we get when you go to Mourns' Weir. They're coming fresh that morning. Like, you're never going to get a fresher oyster. And the most beautiful Guinness. So it's amazing. And that's when I go home on holidays now, first thing I do is straight there with my dad or my mother, my family, a couple of pints of Guinness, a few oysters. It's awesome. But yeah, like it was, as I said, the heart of the community was the pub. And then going into the city where a lot of the pubs didn't serve food. So they only served alcohol. And it was all about the live music. So, one of my favorite pubs in Galway, a place called T. Cody's, small little pub in the Latin Quarter of Galway. Always buskers outside, always busy in the summertime. Inside is a table in the corner, and it's reserved all day for musicians. So if you come in with your musical instrument, whatever it is, you sit there, you play, and you'll get a few free beers. Some will drink, some might have a cup of tea, and it's just constant all day long. And you just sit there, and it's you got bartenders in there and owners that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s that have been there for forever. And it's like, I feel like that's something that we don't really get here in Melbourne as much. it's kind of it's a bit more transient, the kind of staff. And we don't see it as a career here. A lot of the youngsters that work in bar here, it's, they do it while they're in uni or they're on the summer holidays. You go to Dublin and these pubs, these old pubs in Galway, this bartender's been there for decades, and it's all they've done. And, you walk in and it's all about the hospitality, the warmth in the greeting, the banter, the chats. We sit at the bars as well. It's another thing you don't see that often, I guess, in Melbourne, is in pubs. And we do it in all our venues. There's always stools at the bar. And, really encourage that. And I love it to, whether you're going, I remember even, going back to growing up again, like when we go out to the pub to meet our mates, you'd send a text message or you'd arrange in a group and say, we're going to meet the pub at 7 or 8 o'clock. That didn't happen. They just went, dad would just have a shower and go to the pub and sit up on the stool on his own. And then eventually you'd meet a few people and you'd get chatting. And that was and I think that's why pubs in Ireland are so unique. And there's a place for everybody there. So then I then moved to Dublin after. So I studied, got my degree, moved to Dublin, and I was a project manager with a building company in Dublin. I lived there for probably 3 or 4 years. And again, the pubs in Dublin then are next level again, whereas like the pubs in kind of rural Ireland are more, they're a bit more minimal. I mean, they're not, like the pubs in Dublin are, you got ornate detailing, Georgian, Victorian style bars, incredible detailing and architecture in these pubs. And just, you might see on a Friday after work, streets full, everyone's coming with their suits on, they're jammed into the pub. You could have a pub with a capacity of 100 people, but there could be 500 people outside it on the street. So just a really amazing vibe on the street. So I just loved it. I just loved checking out these new pubs I'd never seen. And they're all so different. But I think one thing that they all have is this. I think that's why Irish pubs are famous all over the world, and why they are in probably every city in the world, is because I think anyone that's been to Ireland or has heard about them or saw them, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get live music. You're going to get a good fun atmosphere, and you're going to get friendly atmosphere and friendly service. So that was kind of it. And then I worked there for 3 years. Construction was, at the time, it was the peak, what they call the Celtic Tiger. The Irish economy was absolutely booming. Construction industry was flying. There was, pretty much 100% employment. Then the financial crash happened, and Irish construction just got decimated. So pretty much everyone that was in my class in school and college that studied construction had to immigrate. So I remember I moved back briefly to Galway, and it was just, unemployment had soared. And a lot of people had gone to Australia, and a lot of people had gone to Canada. Generally, people that were in construction went to Australia. People that were more IT focused or, business and, office jobs went to Canada. And it was simply me just sitting at home on a laptop going, looking for jobs in both Australia and anywhere really. And Canada for me was it was out. And the States, of course, States would have been an option, but their economy crashed as well. So really, there was the only two English-speaking first world economies were Australia and Canada. So being in construction, I opted for Australia. So my girlfriend at the time, her family had some cafes in Ireland, close to Dublin, and she had been working there for years. And I kind of was Googling, and I loving the hospitality scene. And then I started reading. I kind of only knew, as most people do in Ireland, like you think of Australia, you think of Sydney, the Opera House, that type of thing. Nobody really knows much about Melbourne, especially back then in 2000, nearly 20 years ago. But I started reading about the cafe culture and like the little laneways of Melbourne and the hospitality scene here. And I was like, and the coffee, like nobody ever, well, I certainly did never associate, Australia having a really strong coffee scene. So that was kind of the catalyst for us deciding to come to Melbourne. So I applied for a couple of jobs, and I got a job with a building company that specialized in heritage restorations, which kind of suited my skill set. So landed in 2011, started working. They were based in West Melbourne. We were living in Flemington at the time. And my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, she started working with Brasserie Bread in South Melbourne. And then from then on, like we'd be checking out, like I think the first cafe I went to that really blew my mind. I'd never seen anything like it in terms of design and quality of coffee, the level, just the quality of produce and the plating and the presentation of the food was in the auction rooms in North Melbourne, on Errol Street. And it was just phenomenal. I think it was designed by 6 Degrees architects. And I'd never seen a cafe like that before. I'd never seen it like an architectural interior designed cafe. And like food on a plate for, like you could get a breakfast or a brunch dish and it was, I don't know, it was probably $15, $16. This would be food that you'd expect to pay, like 3 times that price in a fancy hotel or that in any city in Europe. And just phenomenal coffee. And I thought the vibe was amazing. So from then on, we were just always checking out new cafes, St. Ali, Seven Seeds, stunning cafes. And eventually a property came up we were doing a renovation, or we were doing a job for John Wardle Architects, the construction company I was working with, and he had a space in an old factory in Collingwood on Rockaby Street. And so I ended up kind of looking at him, and he said, look, I'll design it along with, and he brought in Project of Imagination. Nick and Dion kind of led the interiors. And so they had this amazing team, like John Wardle kind of doing the architectural designs and those guys doing the interiors. So I took the lease on that cafe after, I think it was 2013 or 14. And then my missus ran that for a couple of years. And that was kind of the start of our hospitality journey here in Melbourne. And then from then on, then it was the pub. So I think did that. The first pub, the Fifth Province, was 2014. So and it's weird because I personally had never worked in hospitality before. I'd never worked in a bar. Even though I've always kind of grown up around bars, as in like we spent a lot of time in them. But my uncle had a lot of pubs in London. He had a huge portfolio of pubs all across London. I think in his peak, he had about like almost 100 pubs in London. So we used to spend time, I used to spend time over there with my brother, and we'd go for our summer holidays and we'd hang out with him, just going around. And back then there was no credit cards. It was all cash. And we used to spend our time. That's what we did most of the time, going around collecting cash from all these pubs on a Monday morning. And some of these areas were, they were crazy, like Brixton and Morden and that. So I really loved that. And it was just like meeting the characters in the pubs, seeing the different pubs. He was always doing building projects there. They were always renovating. And it was a real buzz about it. And I really, really loved it. So yeah, so I've kind of in the back of my head, I've always wanted to do something with pubs, but I didn't know, I had no clue. But when the cafe, we're probably 2 years into the cafe, and I had then left my project management job and set up a kind of a labour hire company where we would sub out various like tradesmen to the industry, and we had loads of connections. And so if I got a contract and they were looking for X amount of chippies or whatever the case may be, if I wanted to find them, you went to the local Irish pub. So that's where you found them. So myself and my business partner at the time, you need 6 chippies, go to the pub, you'd have 5 for the next morning. That's where they all were. So it's very much like still that old school Irish mentality was, you land in a foreign country, you go to the first Irish pub, you meet people and you get a job and you go off to work the next day. And it still exists. It's crazy that it still is like that. And it's great. So, and that's what happened. And then so a lot of those guys that we hired then kind of built the cafe. And I remember I was still really busy at that, and I was helping out Mags in the cafe, setting up systems, procedures, learning the kind of back of house, the bookkeeping, the accountancy. And I guess from construction, being a project manager, you become, and you're trained to be very systematic. It's very process driven. So, always working out of spreadsheets. And this is like before we had all of these advanced systems we have now. Like, it was just knowing how to like really drill into spreadsheets and numbers. So I was always kind of doing that with the cafe. I found it like really, really difficult, not knowing like you're coming into it, having no experience and not really even knowing the benchmarks for your cost of goods, or where your rent should be sitting percentage wise, or what's an acceptable wage? Are we doing well? Are we doing not? I didn't have a mentor to say, okay, listen, your wages should be X, So it was just really, and there was limited information you could find. There was no ChatGPT at the time, or that you could just punch it in. So it was a bit of trial and error. So just constantly, and I think wages was the big thing for us in the cafe, even though at that area we were lucky that Jetstar Qantas had relocated their head office just down the road. So there was like 500-600 employees. We had getting smashed in the morning for takeaway coffees. Then we had a really strong breakfast and lunch trade. And it was in a back street of Collingwood. So it was like, on Rockaby Street, not a street with footfall. And I remember my uncle that had all the pubs in London. He was here at a rugby at the Lions tour, and I think I hadn't actually opened it yet, but I was doing the renovation, and we took him down there for a look. And he looked at me, he's thinking, "You're mad." He said, "You've lost your mind here. This is going to fail." Because in London, it was like, you had to be on a high street. You know, if you weren't on a high street, it wasn't going to do well. Probably changed a bit now, but that whole backstreet culture in Melbourne, people loved it. Like, people loved to, try and have a little hidden secret that only they knew about, and had a bit of a charm about it. So it did really well. And we did some really, like, it was doing good numbers, but I was really struggling to get it to see money fall into the bottom line. And wages was the big thing. So, I mean, you've got, 2-3 baristas. Like, on a busy morning, then we realized that because there's a queue for coffees, that we needed 2 baristas, sometimes 3. You've got, a big team in the kitchen, and the level of food around that area. Just like, what a stupid thing to do in hindsight, open a cafe in Collingwood, not knowing what you're doing, and you're up against like some of the best cafes in the world. So yeah, it was a bit of a baptism of fire, but so I'm looking at kind of the efficiencies of staff. And I remember I was in there on one Saturday, and we had finished we'd finished a job, a building site, and we used to go there like I'd go to see my missus, and it'd be like midday, and usually like a midday on a Saturday or Sunday, everyone would be winding down, the breakfast rush would be over, and you might have a lull between breakfast and brunch. And I was sitting there in the cafe, but there was 7 or 8 of us. We had just had breakfast, had a couple of coffees, and there was probably 3 customers in there on their laptops, drinking coffees, probably been there for an hour. I think we were charging $3.40 at the time for a coffee. And there was 4 or 5 people in the kitchen. There was 2 baristas on there. There was a girl on the floor, and there was a manager in there. And I was, you're doing the numbers in your head, and you're thinking about it, and your head is spinning, as it always is when you're sitting in your own place. And then we finished up there, and we said we'd go for a drink, and we went to a local pub, not far down the road. Again, obviously we're crunching the numbers in my head. Go to the pub. There's like 10 of us. This pub's got like an island bar, horseshoe type bar, and there's like customers all the way around it. And there's one like young girl, probably a backpacker, working in there, and everyone's drinking, probably 3-4 beers an hour. And it just occurred to me, I'm just like, when you're doing the calcs in your head, and like, this labor model is so much better than what I've just come from. So it kind of prompted me to start looking for pubs and venues. And then that's when I found this site, which is now the 5th Province, which was an old ran down restaurant on Fitzroy Street, located in the old railway station. So that was the start of the pubs.
Amazing. I mean, what a tale. I love the journey, just that fondness for Irish pub culture, the bringing all that backstory to Melbourne cafes. I mean, that was real like peak brunch when you came and were charmed by auction rooms, and then, threw your hat in yourselves. But it's so interesting that you circled back to pubs. But Australian pub culture is so different from Irish. So how have you sort of gone on to balance that? Is it about trying to bring what you know from Ireland here, or is it responding to what an Australian pub is like? Is there a sort of meeting place in the middle?
Yeah, you're right. They are very different. And I guess, and that's something that we want to, it would have been probably easier for me to just like keep opening up Irish pubs and, go to Sydney and go to Perth and, cookie cutter model. Would have been easier, right? And just centralize all your menu design and production and everything like that. But I didn't want to do that. And I loved the Australian pub culture. So I remember when I first landed in Melbourne, I was staying in South Bank, in a hotel in South Bank, the Travel Lodge in South Bank, next to that big strip of all the bars there. And of course, I went just doing bar hopping around South Bank, and I was thinking, wow, these bars are weird. I was like, they felt really clinical. They're like a lot of glass and metal, and I just didn't find them very cozy or inviting. I think it was just a big culture shock, so different. And I was really struggling to find a bar that I got really comfortable and I enjoyed. And then I started Googling, and I found, I was just Googling bars in Melbourne, good bars. And I found a blog where somebody had posted a 12 pubs of Christmas. I don't know if you know what a 12 pubs of Christmas is. It's like a pub crawl they do, right? And I must have been an Irish or an English fella that posted it, but it kicked off in the Napier Hotel in Fitzroy. And the pub crawl went from the Napier to the Standard to the Rainbow to the Union Club Hotel. And I was just like, wow. And then from that moment, and they're probably still my favorite pubs in Melbourne, those couple I just mentioned. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And they are very, like, they feel like Irish pubs, open fires, lots of very, very layered, lots of history on the walls, lots of memorabilia, lovely chunky joineries, bar stools, low lighting, great atmosphere in there, and really good kind of hearty pub food. And that was it. I just loved them. I was like, this is, so I think a lot of those pubs, they take influence, or they've taken influence from the old Irish pubs, like little nooks and crannies and little rooms. So very conducive to like really great atmosphere, no matter how big the numbers are. So I really loved them. And I think, with the other pubs in the group, they definitely take influence from Irish pubs in terms of the look and feel. So lots of timber, lots of nooks and crannies, really low lighting, and then again, it's all about the service and hospitality.
I mean, you mentioned the oysters and the centrality of those to the Galway pubs, and but that, food in general is not such a big part of the experience. How have you sort of married that that culinary pub culture that we have here with that sort of Irish hospitality?
Yeah, it's true. Like, I mean, the thing with, and that's the other, that was the other misconception that we were trying to break with the fifth province, is a lot of the Irish pubs, particularly around the world, they weren't really food driven. There wasn't really an emphasis put on food or local produce. And it would just be like, it'd be your classic Irish dishes. They didn't really integrate local dishes or local cuisine. And we really had a big focus on that with the fifth province initially. Was, okay, we're going to also cater for the locals here. We want to have Australian produce on here. We want, local mussels, which are coming from Mornington. And same with the menus, like the old Irish pubs you'd see around the world, they just had the Irish parts, your Guinness and your Kilkenny and your Magners or Bulmers on tap. Whereas we leaned straight away into, we didn't sell off all our taps. We kept half of our taps for local craft breweries at the time in 2011, when no one was really doing that. And we kept, we had a couple of European taps. So we had a big focus on our produce, local produce, imported European produce, and also the same with the food menus. So but also it's kind of difficult because there's a lot going on because traditionally it was all about the live music. So the big focus on live music. And sometimes when you've got, especially if the venue is, one room, it's hard to have live music coming on at 9 o'clock in the evening when you've got people finishing their dinner service in the restaurant. So it's a little bit of a tricky one to balance. So with the latest expansion, we're able to kind of move that. Now we've got dining in its own room with different playlists, bit more laid back, and a bit more conducive to sitting and having a long lunch or dinner. So yeah, and then of course with the Bay Hotel, which is in Mornington, that's big food pub, all local food. But again, we really love just your pub classics. I mean, we don't want it to be over elevated. We don't want it to be too fussy. I think the simplicity of a really amazing fish and chips, or a steak and chips, or a burger, those simple things done right, delivered right, there's nothing better. And I think that's been a really big part of our success, is just keeping it simple, keeping the pub classics on there. I remember going to the Bay Hotel before we took over, because I played golf down the peninsula. We used to stop for a counter meal on the way back home. And, you drive down Bay Street and the Bay Hotel was there. Just looked like from the exterior that is a pub, but I think there was Asian fusion on the menu or something like that. It didn't feel right for the venue. And the locals there was demand there for it. So we kind of really leaned into that, and we still do across all our venues. But yeah, it's not hard to balance. I guess it's the difference between there and Ireland. I guess a lot of the old pubs in Ireland, it wasn't that they didn't opt to serve food; they just didn't have the ability. These old pubs never had kitchens, and they never had the ability to serve food. So it was always, the offering was, limited to toasted sandwiches and some some small forms of snacks just to keep the punchers drinking.
So what's a good day at, let's say, the fifth province for you? Like, what kind of experiences are people having, and what's the mood like?
It's definitely very different. Like it's midweek, very local, and very much a local crowd, regular crowd. I could tell you the names of who's going to be sitting where, when, what time. It's the same faces. And then it's very seasonal in St Kilda in particular. It's because it's got obviously a very transient community. It peaks in summer. And a lot of venues, have massive peaks and scale back, hugely over winter, which we're lucky in, I think, just in the look and feel of the venue. And I think this is across our group in general. We don't have the winter slumps that a lot of people have. A lot of the venues are warm, they're inviting. Some of them feel they do just as well in winter as they do in summer. But so the fifth province gets obviously massive peak when you have the backpackers arrive and travellers over the summer months. So it's food driven during the week. Lots of meal deals, people eating. Live music kicks off on Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We've got 2 acts on a Sunday. Live music early in the afternoon or late in the afternoon, and then into your night. So it becomes a party on the weekends. And I think with our latest extension to the fifth, it was really great to be able to expand the offering and also kind of break up the spaces whereby even me as a customer, I get a little bit older, where I might have avoided coming to the fifth province in the last couple of years because you couldn't have a quiet pint. It was just nuts. It was so there was no breakout space.
So tell me, what's it going to be like when you've done the reno?
Yeah, so the fifth, we're it's going to be, so it's just we've extended our beer garden, we're building a new outdoor bar, and we've got a new event space open, which is be our first kind of dedicated event space within the group, and that's an area that we're going to really try and focus on over the next couple of years. So we've expanded our events team and head office, and we've got 3 new event spaces coming on, within our venues in the next 12 months. So it's very, very exciting, and it's just something that we were never able to do at the fifth. And it's always been a big place for various celebrations, whether it's we see a lot of leaving parties or birthdays and just various events over the years which we've not been able to cater for. So really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to being able to offer this.
So how many staff have you got now? And how do you, does that feel like pressure or does it feel like opportunity?
I think at our peak in summertime we were about 250, maybe a little bit more. Obviously it comes off a little bit during the winter months. And look, is it pressure? I guess it is a lot of pressure. But as I said before, I feel like, especially at support at head office level, it feels like less pressure in some ways. I mean, I focus now a lot on, I kind of changed a little bit my role in the last, probably post-COVID, where I'm kind of focused more on the venue developments, the design and the construction and the openings, which is what I love. I guess that's really what I love most about doing what I do. And we've just got a great team of, operations, executive chef. We've got a really good PR marketing team, graphic design. So we've kind of got all the skills now at head office to be able to make it a bit more smoother and give me plenty of support. So it's just about spreading the load, really. So it's great.
So a lot of venues, get a bit worried about winter. Things do tail off. And as you mentioned, you shrink the team a little bit during those months. But how do you feel about winter? Because, I mean, I suppose I'm seeing myself by a fire in a cozy pub nursing a drink, and it actually feels pretty good.
It's funny. We actually probably get a lot of our team get more excited about winter because a lot of the products that we offer, like especially if you look at the fifth province, whiskey, Guinness, Kilkenny, heavy stouts, beef stews. The Irish food traditionally is kind of more warm, hearty comfort food. So it's easy for us to promote that, and people naturally gravitate towards the likes of this sort of place over winter. And similarly across all our venues, I think just because of the Irish influence and the design that I grew up around, they've always leaned kind of in towards those really warm, earthy tones and warm materials. So naturally people, without us trying to push too hard, gravitate towards our venues. So we don't see the big winter dip, which is really, really good. So we've kind of got a solid trade all through winter. And then, we've leaned really heavily into it with Sunday roast. We do some brilliant rotating Sunday roast across a couple of the venues. And so we find trade has been really, really strong, which is great. So we don't have to really downsize our team. We lose some casuals, of course, but it's largely it stays pretty solid.
Love it. Well, wishing you a good winter. Good luck with the reno and the new venues, Liam. Fantastic to hear the whole story about Ganley Group, and really appreciate your time with us today.
Thanks a million, Dani. Really appreciate it.
This is Dirty Linen. I'm Dani Valent. We bring you untold stories from the food world. Real, raw, unafraid, hopeful. We're driven by a belief that food provides endless opportunities for learning, connecting, and creating the world we want to live in. Delicious, open-hearted, meaningful. If you know a story that needs telling, get in touch. Write to dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thank you for listening.
This